Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of The Catholic View for Women here on EWTN television. We're so glad that you joined us, and we love what we do here at The Catholic View, helping you grow closer to the Lord and His Church. My name is Teresa Tomeo, along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana, and we all wear many hats and operate in different segments of radio and TV. And so we'll spare that and get right to the top topic here. And we're going to actually talk about an issue that's really important and a very sensitive subject, not just for married couples, single people, but also for people in the medical community. How many doctors do you know? Or many people always come to us and ask us questions here at EWTN. Doctors who are pro-life, meaning they don't prescribe contraception. Right. It's a rarity. And what we're going to share with you today on this episode is a beautiful story of how one OBGYN who always considered himself pro-life because he did not believe in abortion, but still in his practice prescribed birth control, how he came around to understanding the beauty and the truth of the teaching on contraception, and how in many ways he was actually promoting abortions because he was prescribing abortifacients.
That's right. Well, we come across this so much, you know, in the pro-life movement, is that, and people are looking for a good pro-life doctor, because so many doctors out there just prescribe the pill left and right. Like, for example, they'll prescribe it for teenage. You bring a teenage daughter in for menstrual problems or acne, and the list goes on and on.
Migraines.
Migraine. They script out the birth control pill, and like I said, many doctors, like you said, Teresa, they won't do an abortion, but you know, there's you know, that's the stumbling block for them, and they don't understand that. First of all, how damaging the birth control pill is to women's health. I mean, we've done this before in our shows, a whole show just on women's health, and the fact that it's a Group 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization. That's not a pro-life literature. It's the World Health Organization of the United Nations has said it's a Group 1 carcinogen,
which is right along the same level as smoking.
That's right.
Right.
I mean, same thing. And
Same
yet there's
danger.
no warning on the package of the birth control pills like there is on cigarettes, but there it is. And so, and then of course there's the abortifacient quality of the pill that, you know, children, and especially for myself, I never had an abortion, but yet I took birth control pills for many years, and you did also, Teresa. And we had to face the fact that we aborted God's will in our life, and we probably aborted children. You can't tell how many, countless it could be in the number of years that you were on the pill. And so therefore, it's just as bad for that doctor when he's writing that script. Well, it's just as bad as if he had that curette or the suction machine and was doing an abortion, because he's providing an abortifacient to that woman. And besides damaging her health, he's destroying the life of that child.
I wonder how many doctors are really aware of that. Do they actually teach them that in medical school, what the pill is as an abortifacient, or are they just really just so much in the birth control mentality that many of them, now this particular doctor did know, but do you think they really know that?
Well, you know, I've spoken a lot to our dear friend, Dr. Angela Lanfranchi. As you know, she's a breast surgeon. Her and Dr. Bryn did the ABC link and abortion and breast cancer link, and also the link with the contraception, especially Angela Lanfranchi. She's done a lot with that. And she said what happens is they get used to writing scripts. You know, both the drug companies are out there pushing the different types of birth control pills. There's so many now. It's not just back in the day. Probably you and I, Teresa, there was only one kind of pill back then. But now there's several different types. There's a morning after pill and all that. And these drug companies are coming in, chucking out the samples and telling them how good it is for their patients. And they're just, you know, going along with it. They're just very used to. And people too, when you go to a doctor, how many people, I call them pill seekers? It wasn't a successful appointment unless you walked away with a script. You know, you got a prescription, oh, good appointment, I got some medicine. And so therefore, it's very easy and quick. It's harder when you're dealing with the female problems, as we've had in these programs, some of these great doctors that do naprotechnology, they get to the heart of the problem, whereas the pill is really masking over the problem.
And in many cases, it can make the situation worse.
It can make it worse, absolutely.
So let's go to the interview that I did, and this is from one of our recent March for Life events in Washington, D.C., and he's a personal friend of mine, and also my husband, Deacon Dominic, who actually met him on a pilgrimage. He and his wife, Joyce Meyer, from the Archdiocese of Detroit. He's been an OBGYN for years, just like his father, and he thought a pretty good Catholic until he had some very powerful experiences coming in contact with some other Catholics and then doing his own research and having to face the music in terms of what the pill and the contraceptive mentality is doing not only to him but his patients. Let's listen to what Dr. Tom Meyer has to say. I am with Dr. Tom Meyer, who's a personal friend of ours, and the reason I wanted to bring him on, we met him through a pilgrimage that we did through Catholic Radio and EWTN, and he has a very unique testimony. He'll give, of course, the shortened version of it, but he's always been pro-life as it concerns abortion, but he's struggled for many years with the issue of contraception, and recently has come to realize, guess what, the church is right. Who knew? Thanks for joining us, Tom.
That's true. Thank you, Teresa. I guess my testimony, to make it really short, is I'm a board-certified OB-GYN and never did an abortion in my life, or so to speak, because I would tell people I was pro-life and I didn't do abortions. And through pilgrimages and getting more into it, I started...
And Catholic Radio and TV.
And Catholic Radio and TV, I started to accept the fact that most of the forms of birth control that are out there are abortifacients. And so as a physician who said he didn't do abortions, I was actually a very active abortionist in that context. And once that hit home, I quit doing contraception and
Praise
haven't
God.
done it since then.
Yeah. What was that like for you as a medical professional in this culture which is so bought into the lies of contraception?
Well, I practice in a large group of physicians, not all of the same even religion or theologies that I belong to. So the first thing I had to do is go back to my office and explain to my partners that I wasn't going to do this anymore and that this was my personal belief system and I wouldn't allow it and I wouldn't do it. And the nice thing about that is my partners were accepting of that change in my approach, and they've accepted that, and maybe they're struggling now, and I hope my example is making them work on their thought process.
Are you trying to influence others in the medical community to really look at the serious nature, and not just the fact, obviously we're coming at this from a religious perspective and a Catholic Church perspective, but there's a whole other medical perspective where abortion or birth control is not good for people?
Well, when I teach residents at the hospital, the teaching hospital I'm at, I make sure that they get more of the dialogue about how these things work, because there's a way to teach things and kind of gloss over some of these side effects, and I kind of try to teach it black and white to them, that they're what the medical risks are and what the emotional risks of some of these patients are when they go through this. And I think that gives them less ability to just be in denial like I was for the first 2/3 of my career.
Yeah, information, education is so important. God bless you. Much success, and looking forward to marching with you today. What's really powerful to me, a couple of things, and I know Tom, and I know his journey that he's been on, and I actually was the one who, and he and his wife Joyce and I, we both encouraged him to come on the March for Life with us in one of our recent events. But number one, from a married perspective, she was praying and praying for years for his complete conversion on the pro-life issues, because he wasn't there at birth control, and that really weighed heavily on her heart. Joyce won't come on camera. I tried to get her to come on during the interview, but I remember her telling me this story when we were on one of our pilgrimages, our couples pilgrimages in Italy, and what it meant to her to finally see him come around. So the power of a praying spouse in all areas, even in this tough topic of contraception, is huge. And then I think realizing that he could lose, possibly, he was worried about maybe losing his practice, because this is what happens to a lot of these doctors who realize they're Catholic and want to practice as a pro-life doctor. They come up against this contraceptive mentality across the board out there in the medical field.
And they have to defend their own position against their own peers, which is very difficult.
That's very difficult.
But if you turn it around and think about it in a different way, if you contracept your patients and they are not having the next generation of patients, you're not going to have a practice
anyway.
You're not going to have patients.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, very often too, I mean, my experience is, and you know, Father Frank and I, through our work in the pro-life movement, we hear a lot of these doctors who do, you know, make this conversion over, and that fear is very true, Teresa. They're afraid that first of all, if they're in practice with other doctors, that's a big issue, because if the other doctors are prescribing and they're no longer going to do it, then, you know,
it's intimidating.
It's very intimidating. But every doctor that we've experienced who made the stand, who stood firm by the church's teaching and said, I'm not going to do this, their practice flourished.
Well, it's because they're being honest to themselves and with God, and they're being faithful.
Yeah,
and honest to the profession, to their own profession.
Exactly, because they're, and that's what he discovered, Dr. Tom discovered, because he realized, I'm not doing my patients any good by prescribing these things.
That's right.
Doing damage. Well, we're going to talk more about this in terms of breaking through this contraceptive mentality, especially in the medical field. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Here's a question for you, or that remote in this day and age. That's how old I am. Don't touch that dial. Well, you know what I mean. Would you take a pill that had the potential to kill you? You may be doing that already. We'll examine that question when we come back on the Catholic View for Women. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us in this episode of The Catholic View for Women. We're talking about breaking through this contraceptive mentality. We've discussed this on the show before with women who've had a complete turnaround on the issue and learned that, the church's way is always the best way, not only for us psychologically, spiritually, but also, of course, physically. In this episode, we're looking at one doctor's journey, an OBGYN who had a very successful practice and figured he was a good Catholic guy and a Catholic doctor until he really had one of those come to Jesus moments about the issue of contraception. So we're glad you're joining us for this program because it's very important. Also, a very special thank you to our spiritual advisor, Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life, who really works with us on these shows to make sure we have the church documents and the various quotes from Scripture, and also many of the resources that we have for you are provided by him. And nothing gets on the air without his review. So just to let you know that we are true to the church teaching, obviously, in the orthodoxy of the faith. Wanted to get back to that question I posed. So two things here. We would never take a pill, God forbid, that would kill us. But then when you're talking about the birth control pill, in many cases, if it's the morning after pill or even the birth control pill is often an abortifacient, depending on the strength of it. You're taking a pill that could, in addition to eventually, God forbid, if you're on it long enough, cause some serious mental and physical problems for you, could even kill you in the end because that's connected to heart disease and other things, breast cancer. But you would never take a pill to kill your child, but in essence,
that's what's happening.
That's what's happening, right, Janet?
Yeah, well, very often, people think of the birth control pill as preventing pregnancy. And what it's really doing, it's preventing implantation. Because first of all, the fertilization happens and the little baby has to make its way down the tube and then implant. So what the pill does, it makes the environment in your uterus, the lining, so thin that the baby can't implant in your uterus, and therefore it's aborted. So that's why it's called an abortifacient. So for people who aren't familiar with that, that's the reason that it's an abortifacient. You may say, oh, well, Janet, does it happen every time? You don't know how many times it's going to happen in a given month. The other thing that's dangerous about taking the pill, first of all, especially when they give it to young people, the birth control pill, for it to be 100% effective, you have to take it the same time every day, because the level of the hormone has to be high enough in your system to do its job. And that's why people will say, oh, well, my birth control failed. Well, because you weren't following the directions and doing it properly, and therefore now you get pregnant, and then what happens after we get an unwanted pregnancy? Then they go off for an abortion because their birth control failed. So it becomes a very vicious cycle. It's amazing how these young people, they can use all these devices, but they can't deal with their own contraception properly. And that's what happens. And then off they go to the abortion clinic when the contraception fails. Yeah. But to me, the worst in the whole thing is the fact that you're taking high doses of these hormones that are
steroids.
Steroids. Now, I think of especially when these teenage girls get put on the pill, it makes me insane, because if your young son wanted to be put on steroids because building up muscles and all this and going to the gym, most parents would say,
they'd fight that.
No way.
That's horrible.
That's terrible. Oh. But yet the same parents will march their daughters into a doctor's office because they're having heavy bleeding or cramps or whatever, and or acne even, and they'll take that prescription off. They'll go and get the birth control pill. So it's just terrible, really, that we're not really paying attention. Like, the church is teaching God's ways right, but they really need to pay attention to the danger they're putting their young girls in.
But also, I think, from this whole idea of radical feminism, where they're constantly promoting abortion and sexual promiscuity and birth control, or what they call, reproductive, quote-unquote, freedom or reproductive rights, that's such an oxymoron, because there's no quote-unquote reproductive freedom when you're going against nature.
That's right.
God's law, and of course, which is also the natural law.
You're reprieving your own reproductive freedom.
And also, the church is often accused of being sexist, right? But how sexist is it that there isn't a cancer-causing birth control pill for men?
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, bring it on.
And how many women, I'm trying to remember which country it was, where they were the ones who the testing was done for the birth control pill early on before it was released in the 60s.
That's in my book, Recall Abortion.
Yeah.
I did a whole thing on this, and it was actually in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, I was going to say Puerto
They
Rico, Cuba,
experimented on the women in Puerto Rico, and actually it was a very, very high dose of the very first pill that was experimented down there. And actually women died from taking that pill. They had strokes, and all those results were kind of masked over and hidden. And the researchers just highlighted like the success part of it. And
To
the
push it
FDA
through, push it through.
and the FDA gave it quick approval, and that's how we got the birth control pill on the market. And when I was in Puerto Rico, I actually spoke to women who said, "Oh yes, my aunt died." I mean,
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and that's what made me include it in my book, Recall Abortion, because I was so shocked at that. I said, "You mean this doesn't get out there?" They said, "No, nobody really knows. Nobody cares about what happened to the women."
Well, because
here in
it's the
Puerto
overall
Rico.
Planned Parenthood and the birth control
That's right.
mentality out there that's something that we have
And
to have.
international Planned Parenthood is so indebted in Puerto Rico, it's crazy. I mean, birth control pills and abortion is
No
rampant.
restrictions whatsoever.
None.
What does a parent say when a mother takes her daughter to a physician who prescribes for acne, migraines, etc., prescribes a contraception? What should the mother do? What are the resources?
I'll
What
get a
options
second
she has?
opinion, Doc, and I'll get back
Yeah,
with you.
first of all, they should get a second opinion. But if I'm going to tell them one story now that this should scare them. That
Oh,
they'll
I
never-
remember this. This is the one
Yes.
that we heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teresa and I gave a talk at a conference, a Legatus conference, and after the talk, we're on the buffet line for lunch, and this woman comes up to us and says to me, "You know, Janet, I didn't want to raise my hand and ask a question, but I want to tell you a story." She said, "We just came last week from my best friend's daughter's funeral." And I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "Well, this best friend of mine, her daughter went away to college, and she developed severe acne in her freshman year of college. And the mother herself had acne as a teenager, so she kind of identified. And she said, the campus physician, Mom, wants to put me on the pill. But as you know, Mom, I'm going to be a virgin till marriage. I don't even have a boyfriend."
It wasn't for birth control
It wasn't for
purposes,
birth
right.
control. It was for this severe acne she developed. So the mom said, "Well, if the doctor said it's going to clear up the acne, then it's okay because you're not sexually active, so you're not going against the church's teaching. You're not taking it for that reason." Well, she took the birth control pill. She was on it for a few months.
Wasn't she on Yaz? Wasn't that the
It was
Yaz?
Yaz.
Yeah.
It was Yaz, that Yaz and Yasmin. And she came home, her roommate, back to the dorm and found her roommate collapsed on the dorm floor. They called an ambulance. They took her to the hospital. She laid in a coma for several years until she passed away. And we met this friend of hers.
shared the story
Shared
with
the
us after
story.
we-
And so I would say to a mother, to answer your question is, just like with abortion, I always tell the mothers, you take your daughter for abortion, well, that step she takes onto that abortionist table might be the last step she takes, because women still die from abortion. Well, if you get that prescription filled for your daughter, that might be the last step she takes. And that was not the only case. Since I've come public about that story, and I've done it on like our Defending Life shows, and we've done it on the radio with you, with Teresa, I've had other women come, and the list keeps getting longer and longer. I could almost start a poster now on women killed by taking that Yaz or Yasmin or some of these other pills. It's Lord have mercy, exactly.
And God bless the courage of Dr. Meyer for now, as you heard in the interview, when patients come in, he's telling them,
Right.
this is why I won't prescribe this anymore, and this is
Right.
what it's going to do to you, and
Exactly.
possibly your child. And it's
God bless
really,
him for fulfilling that
Yeah.
function of education, medical education
Yeah.
as well.
But you know, we can also evangelize our doctors.
absolutely. Isn't it Dr. Levantino was evangelized by one
He
of his
was
patients?
evangelized by
He was a
one
former
of his
abortionist, yeah.
patients as a former abortionist. So when you go to your doctor, and let's say he's a good Catholic OBGYN, but he still is prescribing the pill. I know such of a doctor I've been working on, and I tell him stories every time I go. And I say, you know, Doc, you should really consider your position on that. And I bring brochures. I get some of the things from Dr. Lanfranchi's website. I order the brochures, and I say, did you see this brochure? Why don't you take a look at that? So don't be afraid to talk to your doctor and evangelize him, because he might be
Well, that's what happened to Dr. Meyer.
Right.
People were witnessing to him.
Yeah, so we need to witness to our doctors, whether they're prescribing birth control pills or whatever they're doing that you know is not right.
You could be saving your own life and
and
many other
theirs.
lives from all the patients that
That's
visit
right,
that
and
doctor's
you're saving their
office.
soul too.
But isn't it frustrating with the level, how thick this level is in terms of how
Right.
Planned Parenthood, you mentioned International Planned Parenthood, how big they are in Puerto Rico, but they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And how they've infiltrated educational system, the medical community, Hollywood. They've just won everybody over about how this thing about reproductive rights and reproductive freedom. What they're doing is they're keeping their clientele base up, because if the birth control fails, getting the birth control from Planned Parenthood, then they have abortion as a backup. So they're just creating
making money
clients.
no matter what. They're making
hand
money.
over fist.
And you know what makes me crazy too is the liberals on the left there. They're so concerned about the environment. Well, for decades of the pill, and as we know that when women urinate, I mean, part of that is being excreted out there. And
not to mention how unnatural the pill is. So if you're an environmentalist or a naturalist, why do you want to take that poison?
Teresa?
Unfixing your body, basically.
The fish now are being neutered in a lot of the
that's been out
lakes
there
and
for a
rivers
while.
and streams.
Yeah.
That's been out there for a while. It's
And
amazing
that's
though
water
that
we drink, turns around, goes around the cycle, and we drink it in our homes.
Exactly.
Well, we only have about 3 minutes left, and this is a really important, well, all of our shows, we try to give you as much important, helpful information as possible. This topic is so embedded in our culture. We always want to make sure we have great resources for homework, and Janet's going to share those with us right now.
Well, just first, before we go to homework, I would like to remind everyone about our Kitchen Madonna. Beautiful, our patrons for the show, and also too, pray to Mary for the courage to not use the pill and do the right thing.
She did not use the pill.
No, obviously.
It didn't exist back then, but what would have happened if she would have decided to contracept?
And of course, it's a beautiful statue. We have the broom here, which reminds keeping the house clean, but keeping our bodies, our thoughts, and things clean. The kettle here is to nourish us in body and soul. And then the keys, of course, she'll take us to the keys to the kingdom, but also to keep the house safe. And it's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. I have one in my home, and I know you ladies have it in yours. And Mother Angelica always said those holy reminders help to keep our thoughts pure and around the house. But for homework, let's see. Number one is to read my book, Recall Abortion. I have a full chapter on this, all the things I was kind of saying, but in bigger detail in that book. It is available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. Number two, to pray and make sacrifices for healthcare professionals to be defending life in their business. So if you know of a doctor who maybe is prescribing the pill, start praying for him. Bring him to daily prayer. Number three, of course, visit priestforlife.org/doctors to find links to the very many resources where you're looking for those pro-life doctors. We have a full page of links to all the professional medical people out there that you can find when you're looking for a good doc. And of course, number four, visit the Catholic View for Women website. And I'm sorry, number four, visit the Catholic Medical Association website, catholicmed.org. And then finally visit the Catholic View for our website.
I know we also provide links to my book, Extreme Makeover, because you have a whole chapter in there on the contraception, deception, and your testimony, your reversion story is in there, which you talk about your own journey from being weaned off of contraception. Thanks for watching us. We know this is a sensitive topic, but keep your minds and your hearts open to the church teaching. The church will never steer you in a wrong direction, because it's truth and it's beauty, and it comes right from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ himself. And come on, let's be honest, folks. Don't women and men, the medical community, all of us deserve better than abortion and contraception. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Catholic View for Women. Have a great day.